Hi, thanks for watching again. This is Dr. Podcasts episode number 80, and I'm your host, Dr. Robert Seichert. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And if you could subscribe and follow Dr. Podcast, we'd really appreciate it because we'll get more great guests like we have today. And please like and repost this episode as well so that other people can see it. Today, we're discussing a very important topic that's in the news a lot in recent years and increasingly so. The topic is autism, and we have an expert on this subject today, Dr. Haitham Amal, and he is currently an associate professor at the School of Pharmacy and the Faculty of Medicine at Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Israel, but he's currently a visiting professor at Boston Children's Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard Medical School and Harvard University. He's also the head of the Laboratory of Neuromics, Cell Signaling, and Translational Medicine. And he's the chief science officer and co-founder of NeuroNOS and Point 6 Bio Companies, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So, Haitham, thanks very much for joining us today and taking time from your busy schedule to discuss this very important topic.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm happy to be here with you and discuss this important topic.
Right. So let me ask you, how did you start working on autism or become interested in it? And also you have some interest in Alzheimer's disease, which there's some associations, which we'll talk about. How'd you get interested in those and specifically autism?
So generally speaking, I started working on neuroscience in my master's degree in 2007, more than 18 years ago. But specifically in autism and Alzheimer's, I started to work at MIT when I was a postdoc fellow at the lab of Professor Stephen Tannenbaum, where we started to look for links between nitric oxide, autism, and Alzheimer's disease. So this is the at the time where I started. It was around 2015 where I started to be interested in these two disorders, and later on more specifically in autism.
Right. So can you define autism and tell us what it is? And it's now referred to as autism spectrum disorder or ASD. Why the name change and just explain what autism is.
Yeah, so autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is associated with many behavioral abnormalities, such as social deficits, communication, anxiety-like behavior, and others. And the reason it's a spectrum is because there's a variability of these phenotypes and behavioral outputs between a lot of individuals. So therefore, it is autism spectrum disorder.
I see. So it affects different people differently. It's not the same in
Exactly.
person.
Yes. Mhm.
Do we know what causes autism? That's in the news a lot lately. There's a lot of debates about it. Is it environmental? Is it genetics? Is it a combination of the two? Does it run in families?
Yeah, so this is a really important question that we are as scientists are trying to decipher. And of course, there is the genetic side and there is the environmental side, and also there is the combination of both. So for example, we work a lot on a specific mutations such as SHANK3 or SENTINEP2 or neural gene 3, many mutations that are very associated with autism, and it's already approved, worldwide and scientifically. So in this part, we know that genetic mutation is involved and may lead to autism. But also on the other side, we think that there is an environmental part of this. And part of it, we have done a lot of work on arsenic, which is a metal that is, you can find it in water, on rice, and baby-based products, rice. And we found that arsenic, if you give it, in our case, to mice in low concentrations and high concentrations, it can lead to autism and Alzheimer's like behavior experimentally. Also, the other topic that we discussed, and we're going to discuss it in the coming few years, is the air pollution and the environmental factors. So there's a project that is going to be led by Professor Stuart Lipton at the Scripps Institute, who's going to lead this consortium of a grant that will ask the question how air pollution or whether air pollution can lead to autism spectrum disorder.
Right. I know you just published an article on that, on air pollution, autism, which was all over the media. I saw it just about everywhere. So it sounds like autism, you need to have an underlying, some sort of genetic mutation, possibly several mutations. And then if you're exposed to some sort of toxic environment, like maybe air or arsenic in the water, or possibly microplastics or nanoplastics, that can trigger that abnormal gene to give you those problems. Is that a nice summary? Is that correct?
We don't know. We don't know. We
No.
don't know about it. There's a lot of speculations. I am, as an experimental scientist, when I conclude, I have to see the results in my lab or in other labs, of course, in order to conclude this. Meantime, as I said, we're gonna investigate this air pollution with autism thing in the coming 3 years. As I indicated, we worked on arsenic and other labs worked on other things, but we know that even monogenetic mutation can lead to autism. So as I indicated, SHANK3, Sentinap, and hundreds of mutations already proved that a single mutation of each of these genes can lead to autism.
So I did some research on this on the CDC website, and according to the CDC, back in 2010, the incidence of autism was about 1 out of 68, and now it's up to about 1 out of 36. So it's almost doubled in incidence in the last 10 years or so. Do we know why that is?
So again, I think that there are many factors, okay, and I indicated part of them as environmental factor, but also I think there's a big awareness and a huge awareness of the families to diagnose their kids. So I think in addition to the biological and environmental factors, I think that there's increase of the awareness and increase of the quality of diagnosis by clinicians. So I think all of these factors together may be the reason for this increase that we are seeing in the last decade.
All right, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned three genes that could mutate and cause this. Are these readily testable? Can a parent bring a child to a laboratory or maybe a pediatrician and check to see if they have one or more of these mutations?
No, so I mentioned three, but there are hundreds, as I indicated.
Hundreds.
You can find on our databases, on the databases of autism, SFARI database called, you can find hundreds of these mutations. So nowadays, of course, people can do DNA scanning or genetic scanning and can identify what are the mutations that they may have or not. So, for example, yesterday I had a conversation with a parent that he has a low functioning autism a girl with low functioning autism, and they did the screening and he said none, a single mutation, and he is clueless what he's gonna do. So, and this is the main issue now, that there's no any therapy or drug, FDA approved drug specifically for autism. Of course, there are other solutions, but they are not working well, such as, Risperdal, which is a drug that is given to other psychiatric diseases. And now there are many people that are using cannabinoids. But I mean, all of these solutions are not the right solution for autism, pharmacologically speaking.
Right. So they may help a little with certain symptoms, but they don't get rid of the problem, the underlying
Right.
problem.
Exactly.
Another interesting thing is the incidence of autism going up similarly in other countries? For example, you're from Israel. Is it the same incidence there roughly? Or is it different in different countries and different parts of the world?
Oh, yeah, so we see the increase as well in Israel. So a few years ago, it was I'm not sure about how many years ago, but it was 1 to 200, and now we are talking about 1 to 80 or 75. So we see this increase all over the world, including Europe, United States, and the numbers are increasing, and the need for therapeutics and biological diagnostics are indeed crucial at this point.
Right. Another interesting thing is it's about four times more common in boys than girls. Any reason for that? Do we know why that is?
So yeah, so this is also, I believe personally, a debatable issue. So I have my lab has published several papers on this issue, and also the literature now is showing that it's not 1 to 4. It's closer. It's 1 to 3, and
I see.
sometimes some studies are showing 1 to 2. And I want to share as an experimental scientist what we have found in a paper that was published last year in my lab, and so we found that the same mutation, SHANK3 and SYNTANAP2, leads to the same behavioral and synaptic and molecular deficits both in males and females, meaning that I'm afraid that there is an underdiagnosis of girls of autism, and therefore we see this big gap. But again, as an experimental scientist, we need to do further investigation to prove this. But I mean, the 1 to 4 ratio is not valid at this point.
I see. So maybe underdiagnosed in females for now.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now, you mentioned nitric oxide earlier. Can you tell us what nitric oxide is and how that's related to autism and possibly other disorders?
Yeah, so I started to work on nitric oxide back in 2015 at MIT at Stephen Tenenbaum lab, who co-discovered that nitric oxide is produced in our cells, in human cells. And nitric oxide is a crucial molecule in the body and in the brain. So specifically in the brain, it's a molecule that is responsible for neuronal and synaptic functions, and without it, the brain doesn't function. But we have
That's
discovered
how nerves connect to each other using
a part
nitric
of the mechanism, of course. It's not the
part of it.
only mechanism, but
Right.
it's part of the mechanism. But what we found is that there is a significant increase of nitric oxide in autism. And this was the discovery that we have published last year in Advanced Science, that we showed that not only in blood samples of with kids with autism, we found it in stem cells that we got from autistic kids, and we also proved this in 3 different mouse models that has different genetic mutations. So what we found, increase of nitric oxide in the brain, and when we taper it down and try to inhibit the enzyme that produce nitric oxide, we saw reversal of the autism-like phenotypes in mouse models, but also we saw a reversal in synaptic and molecular abnormalities in the stem cells that we grew up to actually neuronal cells.
So that information could potentially be used to develop a drug that targets specific enzymes.
Yeah, so we're working on this inhibition of nitric oxide in the brain in the last 4 years, and happily in the last year I have co-founded and established a company named Neuronos that now is working hardly on developing a small molecule that can inhibit the nitric oxide specifically in the neurons in the brain, which, as I said, may lead to reversal of the behavioral phenotypes. And hopefully we are advancing very nicely and working very hard on this topic.
Wow. I know that your paper on this topic, the nitric oxide, was one of the most popular on the subject out of numerous articles in the literature. So it's a extremely important finding. And if you can find a drug that targets that specifically, that would be awesome. I've had a few guests on Doctor Podcasts in the past who work with human brain organoids, which are derived from stem cells. And one of the guests, I believe, is actually taking stem cells from patients with autism and then creating a human brain organoid from that to study that further. Do you think that would be helpful in figuring out what's going on?
So this is a great question actually, because this is actually the collaboration between my lab and Professor Stewart Lipton lab at the
Oh,
Scripps Institute in San Diego. He is producing these human organoids actually
oh,
uh, for autism and also for Alzheimer's. And we are trying together, and of course, Stuart Lipton is one of the leading scientists in this field. We are trying together to decipher the mechanism of nitric oxide and other molecular mechanisms in these organoids. Of course, this is a great platform in addition to the other, scientific research platforms and mouse models and the in vitro. Human organoids is a great advancement in the research in the last decade, and I think it can give a great promise in the coming few years.
right. The doctor I spoke about is Dr. Herbert Lackman, who's at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine here in New York City. I might connect you with him. Maybe he has some things that might be synergistic with your work. But
Of course, happily,
that's
happily,
great.
happily.
I
Mhm.
also spoke with someone in Switzerland who is growing human brain organoids and actually connecting a network of them to the internet so that people can actually interact with the human brain organoids. So I'll send you information about that as well, and maybe putting that all together will speed up the process.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about your Eagles Autism Foundation grant and your connection to the Philadelphia Eagles and Jeff Lurie. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I have been interested in the grants that the Eagles Autism Foundations are giving to research. So every year, I think they are giving 8 to 10 grants, led by Mr. Jeff Laurie, the owners and the head of the Eagles. And I have submitted the first time application. I didn't receive the grant. And then the second year I submitted, and I was the first, happily, non-US scientist to receive the Eagles Autism Foundation grant. I really thank them for this contribution, and I thank specifically Mr. Geoff Flory for this great efforts that he's making together with the Eagles to make the autism research advancing. And it's really a great opportunity to be part of this phenomenon.
Well, that's great. Very important.
Thank
Now,
you.
you mentioned earlier there might be a connection to Alzheimer's and also possibly to certain types of brain cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so of course the link of nitric oxide and Alzheimer's was discovered back ago, many years ago, again with Stuart Lipton and other scientists, and also with brain cancers. We see in the literature many work that is showing the link between nitric oxide and autism. And what we are trying to do in now with Neuronos company is trying to develop small molecules for each of these disorders. So it's a platform of molecules that may lead to the therapy of, for example, glioblastoma, neuroblastoma, and also Alzheimer's and autism. So we think, and I think the scientific field now is aware that nitric oxide is a molecule that is a major pathological molecule that is shared among other neurological disorders, not only autism and Alzheimer's, but also brain cancers and maybe other psychiatric diseases.
Hmm. Interesting. So there might be a common thread there, and if you can treat one of them, that might help in treating others.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier about arsenic. It's a poison. It's found in certain foods and water. Tell us more about arsenic, what it is, and how it may be connected to autism.
So arsenic, it's a metal that is existed in water, not only in, for example, India, Argentina, and other countries, but also in some places in the United States, such as New Hampshire, Nevada, and other places, of course, in the Middle East. And the FDA has declared several times an alarm of part of several of the baby-based rice products. So we know that arsenic can be found in rice and can be found in water and also can be found in baby-based rice products. And we gathered all this in literature, and we wanted to ask the question experimentally whether arsenic may lead to autism or Alzheimer's. And this is what we did. We experimentally we gave mice to drink arsenic, and we tested the behavioral of these mice following 1 month of drinking arsenic, and we found a great change in the brain, biochemically speaking, and also different behavioral changes on the level of sociability, memory loss, and etc. So again, as I indicated before, it's one of the topics that interest me personally, to
Hmm.
investigate on the side of neurological disorders.
Is there any way the public can easily test if the water they're drinking in their homes contains arsenic?
So honestly speaking, I don't have this, knowledge to advise in this regard. But I mean, it's more environmental experts that can yeah give these kind of advices.
I also had a guest several months ago who talked about nanoplastic and microplastic contamination of our food and water, and how it's directly related to many diseases, including autism, heart disease, and neurologic disorders, etc. Have you done any research or work on that connection? Because that's a big topic lately. Everything is polluted with these microplastics.
Yeah, so personally, I didn't do any work, but I read a lot on nanoplastics and degradation of plastics into our food and water. And experimentally, I saw several works that showed behavioral deficits and biochemical changes in the brain. But of course, again, it's a very hard to conclude what is the concentration,
Right,
at what level it leads to these neurological disorders, etc. Again, as an experimental guy, I need to do the experiment in order
right,
to give any conclusion in order not to confuse the audience.
right. It's difficult to do because there are many other confounding factors involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tell, tell us about your laboratory of neuromics and cell signaling and translational medicine.
Yeah, so my lab at the Hebrew University includes around the 12 scientists from all over the world, and we combine different methods and tools, starting from proteomics, big data, to biochemistry, molecular biology, and behavioral. So part of this group are focusing on big data and trying to look on thousands of proteins in the brain. Other part of the group is doing intensive biochemistry and molecular biology experiments. And the third part of this group is doing intensive behavioral tests and examinations. Of course, we work on clinical samples and also mouse models and in vitro platforms.
A lot of work, a lot of important research. Tell us about, you mentioned earlier, Neuronos and point 0.6 Bio.
Yeah, so as I indicated on first of all, generally speaking, I make together with my lab great efforts to find therapeutics and diagnostic solutions. So for the therapeutics, I already indicated Neuronos, and together with this company, we are trying to develop small molecules for autism, Alzheimer's, and other brain cancers. For the other part of this work is Point Six Bio. It's a diagnostic company that I have co-founded and established 2 years ago. And we are trying to identify and diagnose molecularly autism through blood testing. And
That
for
would
now,
be great if you could do that.
nowadays there's no any biological testing for autism, and we are trying through different kinds of proteomics and post-translational modifications in the blood using, of course, AI and machine learning algorithms to develop molecular tests to autism. For now, we already recruited 120 kids with autism, and the results and the accuracy are pretty high. And we hope that we'll have this biological test in the coming few years.
Oh, that would be amazing if you could do that. I have some guests in the past and coming up who now do liquid biopsies, meaning they do
Mhm.
blood tests that can detect
Right.
lung cancer, colon cancer, very non-invasive and gives important information.
Absolutely. This is a super important topic for cancer and other diseases. Yeah.
Right. Tell us what you're doing now at Boston Children's Hospital, which is affiliated with Harvard, and what's your role there?
Yeah, so now I'm in a sabbatical as a visiting professor at the Translational Neuroscience Center led by Professor Mustafa Sahin. I'm at the Boston Children's trying to establish collaborations with people, doing ongoing projects that again trying to answer many tough questions in the autism field and in the rare diseases field. And I'm very happy to be here because Boston is a great hub for academia and biotech. And I hope that being here in the coming year will benefit, of course, the research that we are doing in order to find solutions for autism, Alzheimer's, and other disorders.
Yeah, I interviewed the chief of the Boston Children's Hospital about a year ago. She's discovered numerous genetic diseases similar to autism as well.
Yeah, Dr. Wendy, she's
Yeah,
great.
she's awesome. She used to be in New York City and Columbia, and then she moved to Boston Children's. And
A great personality.
yeah, she's terrific. So you don't travel back and forth now. You're here for about a year.
Right. Yeah, I'm here for a year and happy to be here and to establish collaborations and work also wireless with my lab in Jerusalem. But I
Right.
mean, physically, I'm in Boston. I would be happy to meet you personally sometime.
Yeah, if you're in the New York City area, please let me know. We'll get together. That'll be
Of course.
fantastic. Well, I appreciate you taking your time today from your busy schedule to talk to us about autism, very important subject and increasingly in the news affecting millions of people around the world. So I want to thank you very much for appearing on the Doctor Podcast show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to thank you and thanks Dr. Podcast for the efforts you are making. I was following your work and interviews, and you are highlighting an important topics that is interesting for people worldwide, and specifically today on autism and Alzheimer. This is great effort that you are making. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.